So hello and welcome to the video. Earlier this year I made a series of videos about a tier point run and ended up booking it. You can find those videos linked up here and in the description below. Completing that run became a goal for 2021 and I talk about my channel and its goals in these videos, which you can find here and also in the description below. That was actually an ex-EU tier point run, and surprise surprise, I made a series of videos about that as well, which you can find here and yes, in the description below. There's usually not a lot to report between booking a tier point run and actually taking it, but on this occasion quite a lot has happened. So instead of cramming all these developments into my quarterly update video, I thought I would make a dedicated video on the subject. So with a couple of weeks still to go before I travel, here is an update on what's happened. So stick around.
Hi, I'm Matt. Over the last 25 years, I've travelled a lot. I've lived in 5 countries on 4 continents. I've flown over 1.3 million miles. I've visited over 100 countries, every American state, but I'm nowhere near done. So hit subscribe to see where I go next and perhaps get some inspiration for your next trip.
So as a recap, my tier point run video explained how I used Google Flights to identify potential tier point runs and then refine them using Matrix ITA. I usually call the airline to book, but I also talked about other options. I did this work back in January and was able to find a trip from Sofia to Las Vegas which cost £1,112 and netted 920 tier points. That's £1.21 per tier point, which is pretty good. I reckon anything under £1.50 is very good value. I didn't actually book that specific itinerary for 2 reasons. Firstly, I actually don't really need tier points at the moment, as I'm still benefiting from a status extension given by BA as a result of the you-know-what. Secondly, I have an eye on this channel when booking flights these days, so deviated from that ideal itinerary in order to be able to travel on some interesting planes with some interesting carriers on some interesting routes, and I'm specifically thinking about Finnair from Helsinki to Los Angeles. So instead, I actually booked this, which nets me 740 tier points and cost £1,047, which is £1.41 per tier point. Still a pretty good rate, and I think it's a more interesting itinerary for me to fly. So I booked in January, and given everything that was going on, I fully expected some schedule changes. American Airlines is famed for tweaking its schedule, and sure enough, I've now had 7 schedule updates. Some of them kicked out some pretty interesting situations, so I thought I'd go through them in detail to explain what happened. So change 1 came in 3 weeks after booking and concerned the first flight from Sofia to London. The flight moved forward by 3 hours to a 5:20 departure in the early evening. No problem. Actually, that's probably an improvement, as it gives me a full evening in London now rather than giving me a late night arrival. Every schedule change that pings into your inbox gives you a moment of panic that something catastrophic is happening, so it's great if one of those changes actually improves things. Change 2 came later the same day and concerned my last flight, which is London back to Sofia. BA was obviously working through all of their London Sofia flights that day. The flight I was booked on was cancelled and I was rebooked the following day. This was not a helpful change, as it gave me an entire day in London before flying on to Sofia. Now, regular viewers will remember the golden rule of ex-EU itineraries, which is always take the last leg. It is tempting to discard that last leg and just go home from the airport in London, particularly if you are travelling hand baggage only, so don't need to extract any checked baggage from the system, which can be troublesome. But dropping that last leg is technically a breach of the terms and conditions of your ticket and could, in theory, lead BA to reprice your booking according to the itinerary that you actually flew, charging you the difference, which, if you bought a cheap ex-EU fare, could be significant. Although they could do this, they rarely do, and you would have to be an egregious abuser of the system to show up on their radar. People miss flights every day, after all. So as a responsible member of the YouTube community, my advice to you has to be to always travel that last leg and to be very aware of the consequences if you skip it. Now, in this particular situation, I was disinclined to hang around London for 25 hours before flying on to Sofia. And as I'm not currently desperate for tier points, I did consider dropping that last leg, exceptional circumstances and all that. I had the option to call BA to refuse the change, which I believe might have led to me getting a small refund of fare given I wasn't taking one of the scheduled legs. But as there was still over 5 months to go before travel and further changes were highly likely, I decided to just let it ride and see what happened. This is a useful tactic. Any changes require you to go into the app or the website to accept the change. And if you decide not to do so, it'll just sit there unaccepted until the next change comes along. And spoiler alert, that turned out to be wise. As I said, that change left me 25 hours in London, which is significant. Full marks if you spotted that. In airline ticketing, a stop of less than 24 hours is considered a transfer, and a stop of over 24 hours is considered a stopover. This change turned my transfer into a stopover, which could have had 2 consequences. My ticket did not allow stopovers, so by adding one, BA theoretically could have come at me for an additional fee. And by adding a stopover in London, my onward flight to Sofia now became eligible for air passenger duty, which is £26. As it was BA's fault, they obviously waived the stopover fee, but they can't waive the APD because it's a government tax. So in this situation, BA is going to actually have to absorb that cost. Changes 3 and 4 were trivial, 15 minutes on the flight to Las Vegas and 5 minutes from JFK back to London. AA schedule tweaks are common, but they can sometimes be trivial. Change 5 was more significant in that my flight from Los Angeles to Las Vegas was pushed back by 70 minutes. That's not great because I'll probably just want to get there by that point in the journey, but I'll now have 3.5 hours in Los Angeles, and there are some excellent lounges to spend that time in, provided of course any of them are open. Change 6 brought my Helsinki to Los Angeles flight forward by 30 minutes. This brought my connection in Helsinki down to 55 minutes. If the inbound flight is on time, that's still plenty of time. But it's a bit of a shame as the Finnair lounge in Helsinki is reputed to be pretty good. Looks like I'll have to save my trip to the sauna there for another time. And change 7 was a doozy. The first leg, Sofia to London, was brought forwards by 48 hours. First off, that creates another stopover, so BA has to stump up another £26 of APD. Now we all know that you have to take the first leg of an itinerary like this because if you fail to show up, all subsequent legs will be cancelled. Which presents a pretty huge problem as I'd now have to travel to and from Sofia 2.5 days before continuing on to the States. That's not going to work for me, and I doubt it would work for many people. Fortunately, I had not at that point booked my flight out to Sofia to begin this trip. If BA makes a change like this, they are unlikely to be interested in any incidental costs that you may lose out on as a result of their schedule change. From their perspective, you're starting this trip in Sofia, and so that's the starting point of their interest. So because of all of this, I decided to call BA and get their pricing team to take a look at the situation, and I was very pleasantly surprised to find that they were able to cancel the first and last legs from and to Sofia, leaving me with an itinerary that started in London. I didn't think they'd be able to do that, but they could. And after a hard day cranking the abacus, BA calculated that the refund that I would be due from losing those 2 legs was about 180 quid. I've lost 160 tier points from that itinerary, which brings me down to only 580. And the new net cost of about 850 quid means that I'm getting about £1.50 per tier point, which is not as good as I started out with, but given I've now avoided the costs of getting to and from Sofia, plus perhaps a hotel night or 2 in Sofia, that's still pretty good. So, hello! About 10 days have passed since I recorded this video, and another change has happened. That's now change number 8. I wasn't expecting to have any more changes this late in the day. My Los Angeles to New York flight has been cancelled and I've been rebooked on another flight 2 hours later. which is by no means a disaster. Unfortunately, there isn't a later flight from Vegas that morning that I could move to give me a couple of extra hours in bed. So all this really means is that I'll have a couple more hours in the Los Angeles lounges rather than a couple of hours in the JFK lounges. But there are still obstacles to this flight above and beyond changes to the itinerary. In March of last year, President Trump signed an executive order which prohibited entry to the United States for anyone who had been in the UK or the Schengen area of Europe in the 14 days prior to their attempt to enter the USA. President Biden then extended that executive order in January this year. So, despite things being close to normal in much of the US and the UK, I am still prohibited from entering the United States unless I spend 14 days in an intermediate country en route. You can apply for an exemption to this, but making YouTube videos is unlikely to be considered in the US's national interest, so I don't think I'm going to get one. This presidential order has now become something of a political issue rather than being something grounded in science or reason. Relaxing it seems to have become a huge political negotiation rather than a straightforward recognition of prevailing conditions. So there is no date set for when it will be relaxed, and the word on the streets is that it may not be until September, i.e. after the school holidays. So with just over 2 weeks to go until I am due to travel, I had resigned myself to not being able to go. But this latest cancellation brings a golden opportunity. British Airways rebooking rules are opaque at the best of times, but they're even more complex now a COVID layer has been spread over the top of them. And one detail of the booking rules is that now, if you have a flight that is cancelled, you are able to rebook it with no change fees being due and, crucially, with no repricing being triggered. Indeed, you don't even have to rebook in the same fare code. As long as there is a seat for sale in the class of travel that you are booked in, you can rebook into it within a year of your original date of departure. So the cancellation of those 2 Sofia flights has allowed me to strip them off the beginning and the end of this itinerary and get the money back for that portion of the trip. This cancellation, even though it is relatively modest and makes no material difference to my itinerary, allows me to rebook the whole thing for later in the year, hopefully to a date when the presidential ban has been lifted. And as the tickets have cost me a net amount of about £850, and having had a quick look just now, those particular flights are pricing up at over £4,000, I consider this to be quite a result. So this last minute change remains unaccepted in the Manage My Booking section of the BA website, as I advised earlier. I have until the day before I am scheduled to travel to change it. So I will now put some serious thought into precisely when I would like to shift this to, and I'll be able to rebook it for free. So thanks for watching. Please like this video if you've learned something, like it if you didn't. Subscribe if you're new, and please leave me a comment. I would love to hear from you. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you all again soon. Goodbye.